I know that we have in this White House a president who says he wants to make America great again. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean he wants to take us back to before schools were integrated? Does that mean he wants to take us back before the Voting Rights Act was enacted? Does that mean he wants to take us back before the Civil Rights Act was enacted? Does he mean he wants to take us back before Roe v. Wade was enacted? Because we're not going back.
Be part of this fight. This is our chance in 2020, our chance to dream big, to fight hard, and to win.
I am sick of the word values being talked about like it only belongs on one side of the aisle. Values like freedom and security and democracy are not conservative values, they are American values. And this is the year we break the Republican monopoly on talking about freedom.
Welcome back to Politics Nation. We are continuing our coverage from Columbia, South Carolina, in the state's Democratic Party convention. Joining me now is John Heilelmann, national affairs analyst for MSNBC, and back with me, Jason Johnson, politics editor for The Root, and Atima Omara, a Democratic strategist. John, what did you think of Mr. Biden's interview? I certainly, he dealt with Iran, he dealt with the ICE situation, and I tried to explain to him how hurt some of us that even had worked with him and liked him was on this whole boy comment.
Yeah, look, I think there's the one conclusion we can reach at the end of this week, in which there was a lot of controversy around this topic, and it was a forefront here in South Carolina. A lot of discussion about it in the halls, a lot of people talking about it. Joe Biden is not apologizing, and you gave him another opportunity. Specifically, I think a lot of people...
I even referred to Mrs. King advising me. I tried to give it every...
I think a lot of people, you know, as this thing has played out over some days, a lot of people have started to kind of like to break up the controversy into different pieces.
Right.
And the part that I think now lingers is the part that you focused on, Rev, which is the part about this invocation of son and boy and what was missed by that. The thing that Cory Booker tried to make a teachable moment in the course of the week. And my impression from the way that the Vice President talked about it with you just now, I don't think he does not quite see it with a lot of clarity, I think, and he certainly is taking the posture that he's not going to apologize for any part of it. For the reference to the segregationists and working with them, said that was taken out of context, and also it seems to. I thought the answer was not very clear or clean. You know, he made a reference to Ted Kennedy and how Ted Kennedy was called boy. There were
I didn't understand. That's why I said they wouldn't call me son.
Right.
I brought it right in.
I didn't understand it, and so I thought you gave him a chance to very cleanly to say that he had misspoken, or and to apologize at least for having hurt feelings of people and caused people emotional distress over that. He did not do that with the kind of this far into this controversy. I thought he would have been ready for that question and be able to put it to bed in a clean way, and I don't think he did.
Yeah, Jason, I even came back and said, what would you say to people that were hurt, offended, as I was?
Yeah.
And I think, again, and what really I think we're dealing with politically here is we don't want to feel like we already have a president that never admits any wrong.
Yes.
So I even said, I've said things that I shouldn't have said.
Yep.
Mrs. Coretta Scott King said, you can't talk like that. I'm giving you every opportunity to come on and be the Biden I thought you was when we worked with Mr. Obama, and he chose to answer the way he answered.
So Rev, this is a key thing, because you know Vice President Biden, you've worked with him, so it hurts you because you also have worked with him, know what he's like on the inside. I don't know the guy. Most of us voters don't know the guy. So we're not hurt, we're annoyed, and we're getting an impression.
Oh, insulted.
Insulted. We're getting the impression that this is a guy who wouldn't apologize about the crime bill. This is a guy who won't apologize about the Hyde Amendment. He just flip-flopped on it. We're getting a guy who doesn't apologize about something that was seen as racially offensive by a lot of different people, which makes him concerned about what kind of policies he would engage in. That is the larger theme here, that this is somebody who is stuck in their ways and can't say they're sorry, can't recognize that their actual decisions have policy implications that worry voters. This ain't about a bunch of woke young people saying, I can't believe you because you're not giving me everything I want. This is about some basic stuff about, can you negotiate as a politician? And he is making people question that, even though he served with Obama for 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say very simply, I think the theme is here that regardless of intent, it's the impact, right? And he's missing that point. You can be, your intention may not have been to hurt someone's feelings, but when you hurt someone's feelings, then apologize, then acknowledge, okay, I could do better. And he is stuck in sort of this state where they kind of talk a little bit about like the white fragility perspective, which is, well, I don't understand why everybody is upset. Like, that wasn't my intent. That wasn't my intent. No, just listen to what people are saying about what has actually happened this week, that you talked about almost romanticizing a time in this country almost, the way you did with like talking about Talmadge, the way you talked about Eastland and your relationship with them. And he says, I worked with them. And when people take a look at what he was working with them on.
But these were racist, segregationists.
Yeah,
I mean, of
they were
the worst
working on anti-busing legislation, which is very controversial.
And he was against busing as well, so he's got his own issues with that.
I'll say one more thing, and I know on this controversy, which again I think, you know, we've had a previous discussion with Biden where this notion where there's a big cleavage in the Democratic Party between people who say, you know, Trump is the problem. When Trump goes away, we can work with Republicans, versus people who say, no, Trump's not the problem, he's the symptom, and Republicans have become intransigent. Right. Obviously, the Obama administration was met with intransigence at every step for 8 years. This was Biden addressing that, and in addressing it, to hear him say, independent of the other controversy we talked about, that like there was an old days when things got done and things were civil, even if you had to work with your enemies. And now there's today where everyone's an enemy and you can't get anything done. It does romanticize the past. And I think the question that people have rightly asked all week long is, these were the good old days when things were civil. For whom?
Good old days for whom?
For whom? Right. For whom? Maybe the good old days for some people, for people of privilege, for people of money, and certainly for white people. But I don't know a lot of African Americans who look back on those days and say, well, those were days where civil and stuff got done. For my benefit, it did not. And so I think there are a number of interlocking problems here that have to do with the temperamental questions. Do you acknowledge when you've made a mistake, or do you just dig in like Trump does? Do you
and that
talk about there are policy issues that are on the table? Right. We are now going to have, I think, a thoroughgoing discussion of Joe Biden's legacy on crime and criminal justice, and on the crime bill, on 3 strikes and you're out, on the disparity between crack and powder cocaine, on the death penalty. He is, I believe, the only Democratic candidate right now, at least among the top tier, who to this day, I believe his position is he's for the death penalty. And he was an adamantly pro-death penalty Democratic senator for a period of time. So we're going to have that discussion. Right. And then we're going to have this other discussion about what it means to, can you work with Republicans at all in the Republican Party currently constituted, and what is your vision for how that might happen?
And that's the spin that
those are all big discussions.
Right, but that's what I'm talking about as far as the mistakes that he's making. Because here's the thing, you're not going to be able to work with Republicans. Like, we know that. Like the Senate, Mitch McConnell, if he becomes president tomorrow, if he wins next year, Mitch McConnell's like, hey, I'm not going to give you a Supreme Court justice either. So Joe Biden's strength and power is his ability to build a coalition within the Democratic Party. And if you can't find a way to build that coalition, look, we've got time, right? He's got 8-10 months, but you've got to be able to show that I can bring all of the disparate groups together to push through policy, sometimes in some very difficult or executive order kind of ways, because his fantasy that he's somehow going to be able to work with these guys, that they're all going to sit in a room after January 22nd in 2021 and be like, hey, we're all white guys, let's get it done. That's not going to happen. And he seems to still be pushing that myth. And that's the problem here.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that for me, one of the things that has been continuously frustrating is that he always talks about compromise, compromise, compromise. It's like somehow he got stuck in the 90s and his brain hasn't moved forward in that time frame, because nothing has been done, to your point, since essentially Mitch McConnell took over the U.S. Senate. And when we talk about compromise, even in the last 20 years in American politics, taking aside everything else, a lot of the times we talked about compromise, it was compromise on abortion. It was, we passed the Hyde Amendment because, all right, well, we can't stop like rich women from having abortion, so we'll stop poor women, which are disproportionately women of color. He knew, he was in the Senate when Hyde made the case. That's why he wanted the Hyde Amendment passed. These are things that he knows, right? And so it's very, very frustrating to hear someone who compromise on LGBTQ rights, compromise on issues that concern African Americans. And we now have a generation of voters, millennials and Gen Zers, who are a large block, who are like, nah, Sharpton, Clyburn, all of these individuals, John Lewis, you all are individuals who fought all of this stuff, so we can sit here as a generation now and say, you know what, we don't have to put up with that anymore. That was what the work that you did.
There's just a simple thing that I find puzzling about it, because Joe Biden was Barack Obama's vice president. and this is not ancient history like back in the old days. In the 8 years in which Joe Biden was in the White House working alongside Barack Obama, the Republican Party was as intransigent and recalcitrant
that's
as
what
ever.
I was referring to. When I said, no, but when I talked about he took a lot of shots, that's what I was referring to. And Barack Obama stood there and said, Trayvon Martin could have been me. I mean, he was not hedging on that, which is a whole distance away from saying that Talmadge and them was civil.
Exactly. And look, civility doesn't mean an absence of violence. Civility does not mean humanity. Civility does not mean justice. It just means people aren't yelling at each other. And I think Joe Biden's challenge, what he's got to understand is that the credibility that he built up with Barack Obama is temporary because he's got so many other people that he's running against. He cannot he can't put on an Obama mask for the next 8 months and hope that he can put that coalition together with the same level of passion. He's got to build his own name, just like Hillary Clinton had to build her name separate from Bill Clinton, and when she failed to do that, she also lost.
John, what is the politics of this? Is this something that can significantly harm him with black voters and voters in general, particularly since we're sitting here tonight in South Carolina, or is this something he can get past?
Well, I think this individual instance is something that he will move past, and you already are starting to see as we start to focus on some of the problems that Mayor Pete is having in South Bend right now, also of a racial cast. The parade's going to move on.
For those that don't know, a white officer killed a black
Eric Logan.
Eric Logan in South Bend, where Mayor Pete is the mayor.
And he has been in South Bend for much of this week trying to deal with it and not doing a particularly good job. There's been some video that's been on television today that shows some very, very harsh, a lot of resistance towards his leadership in the city among African Americans.
Including the family. I talked to the widow.
Very unhappy.
And part of the issue there is that the officer did not, he had on a body camera and it was turned off, which is part of what we argued during the Obama administration is, yes, we need body cameras, but we need it where the police can't turn them off. Why have body cameras if they can turn them off?
But to come back to your question, I think that this particular incident is not going to cause a massive hemorrhaging of support for Joe Biden in this state or else or anywhere else. But I do think it's opening up a conversation that we are going to have in a very animated way over the issues we've been talking about over the coming months. You are going to have discussions around crime and discussions around a lot of other policies, larger philosophical questions where Biden's temperament and some of his policies are out of step with a lot of what the activists and the core of the Democratic base is. And I will say, if you went around this room just to the question of South Carolina, what you saw over the course of the last day here, I would say, particularly today, is that Joe Biden's going to have competition for this state. He's going to have intense competition for the African American votes in this state. You saw Elizabeth Warren, you saw Cory Booker, you saw Kamala Harris turn in really strong performances here today. You saw Joe Biden turn in a performance that I do not think was particularly strong. He performed, he was over across the street at a Planned Parenthood event where he was also not particularly impressive, and a lot of the women who were there were not particularly impressed. I think this state, the notion that South Carolina is Joe Biden's firewall, which was a piece of conventional wisdom that people have been saying up until a couple weeks ago. If you look at the action here over the last 24 hours, I think that firewall is going to be under assault by a lot of other candidates who think we can go head-to-head with Joe Biden here.
What Joe Biden has done this week is it's like a basketball team that keeps the other team hanging around in the fourth quarter. You should just put them down. You just put them down and they're letting them hang around. What has he done for Cory Booker this week? Cory Booker was nowhere a week ago. Now Cory Booker is, I'm speaking truth to power. Now Cory Booker is reinvigorated heading into a debate night. This is the kind of thing that Joe Biden does by making these kinds of unforced errors. He's letting other people into the game when he should really be trying to shut people out so that he's only looking at 5 or 6 competitors, not 8 to 12.
Here's the thing that I think that I'm going to go back to that I said earlier. I think very much that this is his strategy. I think that he is not interested in having conversations on progressive issues in the Democratic Party base because he is running a campaign like he is already the general election candidate. He's already determined that he's going to talk to electorate over 50, predominantly white, wishing for that compromise.
That's
that no
not the electorate anymore. Hold it right there. We're going to come back to this. We'll have more after the break. This is Politics Nation from Columbia, South Carolina.